Welcome everyone to South by Southwest 2021. My name is Eric Shamlin, and we pulled together quite an impressive lineup for this panel today. We're going to be talking about the emerging tech and the future of entertainment. We've seen quite an unprecedented year in 2020 with the acceleration of digital transformation and how that's impacting emerging tech and pretty much all entertainment art forms. And our guests today represent some of the leading voices and innovators in the space. So we'll be opening up this to a sort of free-form conversation to kind of see what the different POVs and sort of challenges people have faced over the year and see where the successes have come. First up, we have David Freeman. He's co-head of digital media at Creative Artists Agency. David, if you want to take a quick moment to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Eric. Great to be a part of this panel. Excited to talk a lot about the space. I'm the co-head of digital media at CAA, Creative Artists Agency. The number of different things we do across the company, but our main focuses are selling content to all the amazing new and established platforms in the space, the streaming space, which has obviously exploded over the last few years. We also have a team that's focused on branded content and working with brands around everything content and talent related. Our talent division, which comprises of digital endemic creators, as well as working with our kind of top tier traditional clients across social and launching new brands and businesses through their scale and reach of their direct to consumer audiences. And also we have an advisory practice where we're helping companies in business development, across talent and platforms and everything happening across digital media. I've been at the agency for about 10 years. It's been an amazing run. You go back 10 years, it's decades and decades in terms of digital. And, I think one of the reasons that I still love my gig is the space is changing and evolving so much. And it's really conversations like this that are exciting, because whatever we talk about today, it'll be a different conversation 6 months, 12 months from now. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, David. And then next up, we have Diego, who's been at the forefront of some amazing technology in the space. And so I'll not delay it further and let him give his little intro.
Thanks, Eric. Great to be here as well. Great panel. Great to talk with everyone here. I'm the former GM of Intel Studios. Been running a very large scale lab for content creation, looking at immersive media, VR, AR. Focus a lot on developing technologies for the production pipeline, as well as kind of the new storytelling line, backbone of what immersive media is and will be. Today I'm focusing on working with a few startups in the space. We're pushing through different directions on technologies for new consumption of media, as well as the creation of media. And in general, I think very interesting to see how this shift on the cultural space that we're having has enhanced a lot of technologies and directions that before that were very much a niche in the sites, and they have become a great player in terms of where we're going to go. So that's a big focus right now, and we'll share more on that. So great to be here and looking forward for the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Diego. And last but not least, we have TJ Vitolo from Verizon. Verizon's doing some amazing stuff in this space. It's been a very active year, I know, for you, TJ. So I'd love for you to kind of give us a bit of your background and what you're up to at Verizon.
Yeah, and thanks for having us, Eric. We greatly appreciate it, and appreciate you guys looking at Verizon as being one of the leaders in the AR VR space. And so just some brief background: director and head of Verizon's XR organization. We're tasked with understanding what the intersect is between XR and 5G, and figuring out how we can facilitate, build, and deliver products for our enterprise customers as well as our consumers. So we look at every angle of the business with respect to XR, whether it be solutions to platforms, and see how we can deliver those in a way that really helps drive and build the ecosystem, at the same time support the growth and adoption of 5G.
Fantastic. Thanks, TJ. All right, so as David kind of hinted, any conversation we have today will be radically different in a year from now. The landscape shifting so fast. But I think even more so, if you look at it a bit retrospectively, this last year was unprecedented on many lines. But I think what we saw was a lot of technologies that have been around, mixed reality, real time, different types of entertainment formats, all saw a dramatic uh, maturation, a dramatic need to kind of come to the fore as our world went entirely virtual in many cases. And so you're seeing these new forms of entertainment, new ways of connecting with consumers come out in kind of an accelerated fashion. So I want to kind of dive into it and see what each of you is seeing, lessons learned, big opportunities on the horizon, what technologies you're most excited by. So TJ, I'm going to start with you, but feel free, anybody to jump in at any time. So first question up is, in recent years, consumers have become well accustomed to emerging technologies like AR, VR in real time. But last year, as we just discussed, has seen a flashpoint for some immersive forms of storytelling and entertainment just writ large. Can you kind of talk us through your experience this year as those became kind of to the fore?
Yeah, there's been so much great stuff on the creative front and on the technology front, whether it be the hardware or some of the software. I think what we're seeing really is sort of that, the math, the logarithmic math of the hockey stick, right? The proverbial hockey stick of any new technology. And it's a culmination of many things that's taken us to this point versus just one specific thing. And so if I look across the board, there's a huge amount of developers that are flooding into the ecosystem. There's an explosion of folks using Unity. My 12-year-old is coding on Unity now, right? You've got greater availability of tools like ARKit and ARCore, maturity of clunky AR experiences from a creative standpoint are really taking and shaping up to be really interesting and engaging. So I think you have a bunch of these things coming together all at the same time, really building and supporting the ecosystem. And then you've got consumers, again, that virality piece that's just starting to hockey stick. And as we get up the further up that stick, it becomes more apparent and more aware. And I think that's where we're at today.
Great. And then Diego, I'd love for you to kind of chime in, because I know this has been something you've been really passionate about for a number of years, sort of immersive storytelling, interactive storytelling, and kind of what excites you, I guess, about this sort of newer zeitgeist and where we're going.
Well, I think definitely where it comes to how the culture consumption has changed through the last year. I mean, from one side, we see the box office being shut down, and no more cinemas, no more theaters, no more places of content consumption as an experience, and that's been it's very a tough hit for everyone in terms of I guess how we were accustomed to have a revenue stream and how we get our content out there. So there's a bit of a destruction going on that side, but on the same time, it creates a platform which hasn't been able to really take off until now. And I think that now while there is a side that might be hit, there is a place where these new technologies for immersive experiences can take place. And I think where we look at how people have been consuming content more indoors and less outdoors, something like VR and AR, which used to be some kind of a friction when you go outdoors for those type of experiences. And now there is a huge advantage when it comes for a new type of content consumption, where these mediums basically breaks your walls around you and create an enhanced environment where people can really experience and have a much more freedom in terms of movement and storytelling. There is a huge, I think, opportunity when it comes to, as well, obviously, large scale data sets and transition and everything that has to do with the pipeline that also has been very much invested and put together for the last decade. And now I think we are all suddenly opening our phones and looking at things that we didn't thought we'd be able to do with just a phone in our hand. So that type of storytelling, which it's much more engaging on smaller and private spaces, is becoming something very interesting to see as a platform for kind of putting out there your stories. And as well, I guess, as well for advertisement, because the eyes are there. People are spending much more time on real-time environments, on real-time kind of interactions. So shifting from that type of medium into this more interactive space is something that creating a huge opportunity. And I think that type of technology, when it comes to Unity and Unreal, and any other real engine gaming combined with the production capabilities of capturing content on this type of live game spaces, is bringing new creators to basically redefine where we'll go on that type of interactions.
Great. I think that's a really good segue. I think, David, you have a unique vantage point, I think, in the industry, speaking to a long list of creators, brands, and companies. And so what do you think the lasting impacts are of this pandemic and sort of accelerated shift? I'm very curious what you're kind of seeing out there.
Yeah, Diego touched upon it. I mean, our agency's been around. We're coming up on almost 50 years. And there's certainly been a lot of different moments over that span of time that shifts have happened, but nothing like what happened last March. I mean, we had a massive music touring business, and it's not like it slows down 10% or 20%. It just stops, right? And then you have a set of, artists of all shapes and sizes, directors, writers, producers, talent, who now can't work, right? And so you think about all that happening with that time on your hands, combined with, there were already traces of a lot of the stuff that was happening, right? I mean, streaming dominating, TV viewership was happening, but now, and I could talk about other trends, and you talk about gaming, you talk about interactive, you talk about immersive. It was all kind of happening, but I think COVID has now, accelerated it at such a fast pace. And so I think the initial shock of it was, especially from an artist mindset, like, all right, well, I normally do X amount of movies a year and X amount of television time a year and X amount of endorsement deals. Or if you're an athlete, you're playing. So it lets you sit back and really think about, where do I go and what do I do? And I think for the folks who have always really wanted to engage deeply in immersive and interactive, it's given them time to really dig in, because Diego's right. Like that concert, that sporting event, the experiential things are just not available. It's kind of that simple. So we've had a lot of our folks who are really leaning in, right? I mean, and a lot of the companies that we partner with, the Netflixes and others, were already into interactive and immersive. So it's just starting to accelerate all those things. And as you know, Eric, from some of the work we're doing, the leagues, the teams, everyone's trying to figure out now, okay, what is this new interactive experience? They have to move forward in the fan engagement. It can't just be, all right, come and watch our game or see our concert anymore, right? So, our music team is diving deep into all live interactive solutions to give an experience, right, over what we're doing now, something that's meaningful. So I think the initial shock was a shock, and now everyone's like, okay, there is a new world order, and the things that maybe weren't moving as fast are now being massively accelerated. A lot of it will stick. Do I think some things will come back to normal? God knows we all hope so, right? I mean, for sure. But I think we're gonna see a massive acceleration, and everyone's thinking about VR and AR and XR and interactive and branching narratives and all the different things that can happen now in a way that it wasn't before. And plus, there's so many changes at the big media companies, right? Look at all the changes at Warner, look at all the changes at NBC, and all of the platforms who are embracing, all these mediums. So I think the next year, as things get better for us personally, is also going to see a lot of new different storytelling and ways to keep, fans and audiences engaged.
Brilliant. TJ, I'm very curious. Obviously, Verizon's going big on these types of technologies, particularly with the advent of 5G. I'm trying to wrap my head around, how do you see the ROI on these types of technologies, if not immediately long term? Like, what is sort of Verizon's perspective on sort of the business case for some of these technologies?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, new technology, a lot of, if you look historically where technologies sort of start out, especially from an ROI perspective, right? They're in the enterprise space and they migrate over into the consumer space and they become entertainment pieces. as Diego and David were touching on, we're focused a lot on the consumer, but we see a lot of these real tangible use cases and the return on investment taking place in the enterprise space. So if I could sort of answer this at a very fundamental level, if you can take digital content and blend that with the physical world, you're creating an amazing set of efficiencies for enterprises and for businesses. And what I mean by that is that if you drastically cut down on the amount of searches you have to physically do on a device, a tablet, a phone, and then the views or the looks that you have to get at a tablet in order to take action, you are creating just massive amounts of efficiency. So sort of painting that picture for a second, imagine if I was a retail store rep worker and I had to search a planogram for an end cap or some shelf, right? And then I had to search that planogram on my device and then pull up that planogram and look down and say, okay, I'm going to place the cereal here, the fruit snacks here, whatever might be the case. Now, imagine that in mixed reality, where in real time, your glasses are identifying using computer vision everything within your field of view. So I walk up to an end cap, realize this is the end cap at the end of aisle 17, and this is how it needs to be sorted. And so without looking down at a device, I can automatically start moving things into place based on what I'm seeing in front of me visually as a digital overlay. And this is applicable to any field, any enterprise, where I use a digital device to search for information and then to retrieve information. So this can be a doctor looking at, potentially a physical issue or a cut or something on their skin. A nurse. This could be a field technician. So someone's looking at how to diagnose a problem out in the field, and they're not familiar with a piece of equipment, and they have to go back to their truck and look it up or whatever might be the case. Or a mechanic. And so the possibilities are endless when you can take information that exists in front of you and use that context, that information that exists in front of you, as a way to capture the information, perform the search, and then provide a digital guidance or overlay, graphic, text, whatever it might be, to help you execute on tasks. And so for us with Verizon, it's, we look at people who are building those solutions in the space. What types of tools and capabilities do they need to deliver this out in the field, out in the network, whether it be, like I said, a drone or a field technician. And we start to build those things in. And that's, for me, what really excites about 5G and XR, is that the capabilities that you need for the really complex compute, the really high-end graphics, the very high-end streams, the complex computer vision and machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms that take to run these things, we can offload that onto the network and onto the edge, and then deliver that back down to the customer without them having to worry about, do I have the best device? Do I have this thing? And so for us, that's really where we see the return on investment right now, is in the in the enterprise space, and a number of verticals, including retail, where we can essentially remove steps and processes that we typically take today with digital devices, and then applying that information to the real world and combining those two things together.
It's a great, very thorough answer. Thank you very much for that. Diego, very curious. We've seen a lot of experiments over the last year or so. Netflix playing with interactive storytelling, VR, XR, Fortnite exploding into public consciousness. Very curious what you see as some of the more exciting formats or experiments happening, and then where is it going to go? Say 5 years from now, where do you see all this heading towards? With 5G or real time, the whole.
Yeah, I think all the cards are in place, and as DJ was saying, and David as well, the creators are looking to the space. The technology infrastructure is laid out for high bandwidth interactive experiences, and I think definitely on the more commercial side, if you look into 5 years from now, and you can see the shift already happening as the young generations are really spending most of their time on real-time games, right? Like you have Roblox, you have and the like, that those environments where you spend the time. So I think the option to be on a virtual space and consume content, it's not anymore a very hard step for people to do. They step into virtual environments day by day already. So that already creates this virtual space where the content is much more fit in terms of consumption. And we did the experiment with Paramount and as well with MediaMonks on a huge cinematic Grease experience, which was a musical. And you look at those types of productions and few other months, we did as well a film noir at the space, which right now we're keep post-producing that as well. Things that we can do from remote and obviously disconnected from a physical location. And you know, headsets have been a friction for many years, and maybe there still are. If you ask your friends how many of them have headsets, probably the numbers are relatively low, and that's always a some check for me to see how, you know, how much really that platform is available for consumers today. But again, the infrastructure is there, and the storytelling is already being thought in terms of how you can really plug in into a virtual environment and start really experiencing full cinematic experiences. Some kind of a hybrid between a video game, which where you're super active, and combination with a more laid back experience where you're much detached and being taken as you can see more as a theme park, right? So you go to a theme park, you sit on a chair, the chair takes you through a ride for a couple of minutes, you have some highs, you have some experiences, and you go out of the chair. Similarly, when we look at the AR and VR and XR as general, are those types of experiences that used to be only available in a theme park. Now you can have it really at the grasp of your hand, and immerse into a space where really log in and don't feel like you're, you know, in another space, that anything that you want to be. So I think as it comes to storytelling and immersive experiences, when we look at volumetric, we look at CGI, we look at real-time environments, those things that used to be a very long process for rendering and high render farms. Now, as TJ was saying, everything can happen on the cloud, and you can have this huge amount of beautiful graphics and experiences being streamed directly to you with any kind of device, anywhere you are. And that's opening this kind of, you know, yes, we talk about 5G as the infrastructure laying on top of it, but those are just, you know, high bandwidth data streamers that can really integrate your experience into a much more larger cloud, which is, I think, a huge landscape for everyone to start thinking about new types of storytelling, new type of experiences, new type of branding, new type of everything, basically, which is amazing, fantastic.
Yeah, the potential is pretty incredible when you start to combine all these different technologies. TJ, I'm actually gonna Diego gave me.
Hey, Eric, I just wanted to say one thing about what Diego said, because I think what's you think about 5 years, and I think the point that Diego was making about the young generation is really, really important, right? Like, I've got a 10 and a 13-year-old at home, and my 13-year-old has the Oculus 2. They're huge gamers. They're playing Roblox. They're playing Fortnite. They've watched the branching narrative things on Netflix. Interactivity and being in these worlds is such a given, right? So you think about 5 years, and you think about the fact that also we finally have young executives at a lot of these media companies who are expecting these things. And, you know, God knows I'm getting older. We still have, you know, kind of older 60 and 65-year-old, you know, executives who are in decision-making powers who don't know how to incorporate VR into a NBA game or an NFL game, or really embrace gaming. I mean, gaming was our biggest explosion, you know, during COVID. Not that it wasn't already a massive business, but I think now that divide between box office and gaming, and so we've got this generation. You think about 5 years, like, it's going to be mandatory. They're going to expect it, you know, and I think that's why it's exciting. You think about companies like Verizon and creators like Diego and what Media Monks is doing, combined with our talent, and then we're all going to have no choice, like, you know, because this generation, it's not a lean back, it's a lean forward, you know. And I think that's the biggest X factor, as executives who just don't understand it move out, and this new generation moves in. That's what's going to be fun. I mean, you can't stop technology and the advancement of technology, and adoption's our biggest problem, right? We all know it. It's not that the tech's not there, and it was there 4 years ago when everybody was spending money in VR, right? I mean, Samsung was throwing around money, and Oculus was throwing around money, and everybody, we had all these companies who were raising, and they were throwing around money, and it was fun for us because we're in the selling of content and talent space, but there was no sustainable models. So I just wanted to stress Diego's point of the generation and what 5 years really looks like is exciting, because all these kids, this is what they're doing every day. This is the world they're living in.
I think the generational thing is a, sorry, go ahead.
This is it right here. I mean, this group really epitomizes like the what we need for the next 5 years. Like, we're building the network and the tools for the storytellers, for the marketers, and for all these groups. And these things are just coming together, right? And so at some point in time, it's all going to hit. We all realize we're going to need it, right? And we're just getting there. And I think that's what's really important, is that as an industry, hardware, network, software, creatives, marketing, is all on the same page in this space. And that's why I'm really enthusiastic about XR, is because we don't have just one-offs thinking about different things. We all know what we all need in order to succeed in this space, and we're all on the same page. So that's why I'm happy to be in this segment.
Yeah, I think the generational thing is something that people don't really think through. I think it really, at least for VR at its height, like as much as I'm an avid believer, I've got my Oculus Quest 2, I'm early adopter, hardcore user. You know, I do think there's a bit of a generational aspect that it's you know, even my generation's not really trained for that. But I talk to a lot of like the young parents I hang out with, and they talk about their kids being disappointed that the TVs don't swipe, right? And they walk up to the TV and they're like let down because they can't pinch and pull, right? So I just think that need, to your point, David, is going to drive the adoption ultimately. Everything's got to be interactive.
That's right. And the need will also drive the other big problem, is that there's no monetization and distribution at scale. Like, the monetization models haven't been cracked. Distribution hasn't been fully cracked. That's why it's great that Verizon and others in that category with the phone are going to crack it, right? Because that's where all of our time, unfortunately, is spent, for better or for worse. My kids love to call me the biggest hypocrite in the world because I tell them to stop gaming, and yet I run a gaming division at CAA. So, but you're right. You know, I mean, you're 100% right, and that's where when we're all forced into it for all these different factors, we will find the right distribution models. We will figure out the monetization models, and that's been a little bit struggle on the artist side, on the creator side. I mean, it's great to have people like Doug Lyman and, you know, Lorenzo de Bonaventura and Alejandro Iñárritu and others who just have found places to go big with, but they don't want to sacrifice their day jobs because the paychecks don't pay out. But it's soon going to be there where you can create, you know, a deep immersive mobile experience on the Verizon network, right? And you can experience it right in your phone, right? And be like, okay. And that's going to drive more storytellers, more creators to the space.
I think it's so true. I think there's a really good question, sort of an interim question. TJ, I'm curious to get your take on this. So I think a couple of years ago, we all thought it was be headset-based AR, VR, but really what we've seen rush to the fore is, I guess, what I would call social AR. It's the Snap, it's Spark AR, it's a lot of these kind of social AR lens sort of platforms. Can you talk to, like, where does that stand in the sort of maturity of these technologies, or how Verizon sees those technologies?
Yeah, listen, we track it all, and it's hard to keep track of because of trends, right? And so, you know, Oculus did first act taken aside, Oculus did a great job of bringing VR back to the forefront. So you go back 3 or 4 years ago, everyone's like, AR, right? What's going on with VR? Then Oculus comes out with VR, and then sort of AR takes a back seat. And then you start having these social, you know, AR elements and filters and stuff like that coming to play and coming into factor. And, you know, for us, it's all about what both the consumer and the business, and by the business, I mean sort of a B2B2C model where, you know, I'm working with the content creators and the enterprises that are delivering products to the consumer, what they really need to enable and create these really, you know, supercharged experiences. And so, you know, it's hard because I think they have just as many questions as we do. Is like, how do I nail that target in terms of what's going to be the next thing? And for us, you know, they're really our eyes and ears to say, hey, I need this, or I think this is trending. And the net of it at the end of the day is that, you know, we listen to our community of developers, we listen to our customers, we listen to, and try as much as possible to monitor crazy trends like XR to make sure, you know, we're somewhere in that spectrum of doing the right thing. But to answer your question, I don't have a very good answer on what that view is. And I would assume that Doug and Dave may have, because they're much closer to the end user and to the customer. But you know, it's challenging to keep track of the changes in the dynamic, the virality of XR, AR, VR, mixed reality.
Diego, I'm very curious. Obviously, one of the big side effects, or I guess permanent effects, is, you know, everybody working from home these days, and and how real time 5G is and 5G are most likely going to empower sort of the creative workforce moving forward. So I'd love if you just talk through how these technologies are disrupting sort of production and creative workflows now. We see stuff, on one end like The Mandalorian, but then just a lot of like cloud-based game development. And I would just love for you to talk through some of the impacts of these technologies.
Yeah, I think we somehow got lucky where we were before the pandemic hits. I think all the cloud infrastructure, remote working, telecommunications, everything was kind of just waiting for this kind of day that will stop or shift how we work. And I think a great example is a project we're working with MediaMonks and you're part of your team, Eric, where we started before the pandemic. And we did the physical shoot at the beginning of the year, and we entered into post-production throughout the pandemic. And basically, beside maybe a week or two that there was some shock of what's going on, everyone very much line up quickly and keep working as they were. I mean, I don't know how many moves and shifts MediaMonks did, but for us, it was always some kind of a remote work where we shared data through Slack, Dropbox, and cloud. And we do, video meetings. Zoom was not that popular, but very much soon enough it became. So I think that transition was fantastic in that aspect. When it comes of anything that has to do with post-production and working remotely. When it comes to much more kind of face-to-face interaction with content, we've seen a lot of tryouts to co-work on VR. So we will go into a session where we have a team in Barcelona with the headset, and we'll be in Los Angeles with the headset at the same time and work virtually through a cinematic scene and do a review where everyone is connected. Another session was done through YouTube. So someone took the studio in London and took the headset VR, connected that, streaming directly to YouTube, and everyone else was streaming, looking at the stream at YouTube, so everyone can see the same kind of interaction happening. So it's been super interesting to actually take a lot of the tools that were already there waiting and kind of rewiring them on a very fast and quick way. To have a very direct connection. But I think, again, I mean, we're not creating physical assets. Everything was digital from the beginning in a way. So that kind of medium coexist in this digital space, very natural. And the interaction with it has been really a continuation. I think that the big shift has been more in terms of how consumers take the content. We had a lot of projects that were intended to be what we called back then kind of LBEs, if you remember that term, local based entertainment. Where you create an immersive experience, but it's very much intended to be in a physical location where people will come and consume it. That for us was a huge shift, as we had even for 3 projects planned to be on last South by Southwest that basically was canceled, moved to digital, and any kind of festival and moving forward of content, very much not expecting to have a physical installation. So really looking in terms of how we post-produce the content in a way that can fit into more digital distribution has been a big focus in terms of looking forward. And I think also beyond whatever happened with the pandemic, I think it's very much kind of a safe to go now and expect that if you have a digital distribution platform and a digital infrastructure that can exist beyond any kind of friction that will happen and can very much quickly also be international distributed as well. So that's been a big focus, again, as we see from one side, the gaming consumption going higher, but as well as, where are the platforms and where do you see consumers being and shifting their content creation, that's been a focus as well.
I think the ability to distribute globally has become kind of one of the also immediate side effects. People are seeing these platforms' ability to get to consumers kind of anywhere they are. David, I'm kind of curious to get your vantage on how celebrities or talent, even IP, are using some of these technologies to build new community or find new audiences. Because as you said earlier, live concerts, are kind of a thing of the past right now, or at least on pause. So how are they sort of reconnecting with an audience now, or what are the ways they're exploring it?
Yeah, I think exploring it is right. I mean, starting with music for a second. I mean, obviously you've got a very established touring business for years that was so massively disrupted. So immediately, you had, music agents who are used to routing tours who are now trying to become technology specialists to figure out, live streaming solutions, right? And business models that clearly are never going to support, a Live Nation tour or an AEG tour, right? So it's been a journey, in terms of, artists, specifically music artists, who already had established, thank God for Spotify for a lot of different reasons. So I think that space is finally starting to figure out just now what those models could look like, and by the time it probably is really impactful to consumers at home, hopefully, knock on wood, we're back at a concert somewhere, somehow. I think the sports business came back much quicker than anyone thought. And certainly, Eric, that's something we're working on with Monks, because I do think all the leagues and the rights holders, you saw all these leagues and rights holders hire chief content officers. Now they're hiring chief new media or chief immersives. Like, those titles didn't exist 24 months ago. And I think everyone scrambled when all this happened that, okay, now we need somebody thinking about that, right? So that was a slow roll, because how should the WWE or NASCAR, or the NBA, certainly the NFL, really be thinking about all this? But between live at home and watching or in stadium experiences, but sports came back, and I think that's a great thing. I do think from a talent perspective, we've been really pushing folks to go deeper with their direct to consumer businesses. We've got 100 clients who reach 250 million people every day, which is massive, right? And I still think we're in the early innings of talent understanding the power of that distribution model. And I think COVID and the pandemic have helped them sit back and think about, I mean, everybody wants a Ryan Reynolds chin deal and everyone wants a Jessica Alba, honest deal, but how do I really service this audience, right? In a really, really meaningful way. And I think immersive and everything XR will feed into that. And on the production side, it's been a challenge, right? I mean, the streaming platforms have been incredible in terms of like the volume of things that we can sell, but we don't really make money until things actually go into production and the lights are turned on, right? And that's been challenged. So you're also seeing new formats, people shooting non-scripted shows, with people at home and creating, different formats and doing things that are different. So it's a lot, I think running a digital media department at a traditional talent agency, this is the way it's been for the last 10 years. So for us, things pivoting and changing every 6 to 12 months is part of the course. So we had a much more fluid entry into the changing world. But it's also for our department specifically, I don't want anything, it's hard to say something good's come out of so much, that good's coming out of a global pandemic, because we all know how many people are suffering, but it's woken up our artists. It's woken up them to think entrepreneurially and to embrace technology and to really figure out how to leverage their own brands and their own audiences. So I think it's going to be exciting over the next year as the world comes back and the technology rises to see all the things that will come out, certainly in the entertainment and media and immersive spaces.
Thanks, David. PJ, what are some of the biggest challenges you see kind of ahead? I think Verizon, is rolling out 5G. It's not quite ubiquitous, but it's I'm a big fan. So I'm just kind of like, what are your challenges you're seeing bringing some of these experiences to the fore, to kind of prove out 5G and to prove out, some of those use cases? I'm curious some of the challenges you've run into.
Yeah, that's a big one. There's a lot to unpack in terms of challenges, because I don't think it's one or two big ones. I think it's just a death by a thousand cuts. And it's going back to my original point, which was, why has this exploded? And it's exploded because of a myriad of different things. But why hasn't it been super successful in some areas? I think it's been not super successful because of a myriad of things. And David and Diego laid out, from simple things like the artists just wrapping their heads around how I can use this content, right? Or how I can use this medium to getting, handsets into the hands of, and VR headsets into the hands of more customers, to is this AR thing like functional, or is it like more entertainment, right? And so you've got all of these different lines between function and entertainment, and I need hardware, and do I have the bandwidth, and do I have all these things? But the reality is that as a group here, we all identify those things, and we're all trying to solve those problems. And we're solving those problems because we know there's value. We know there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for all of this. And it's all of us here that are just continuing to beat that drum and to build the networks, to build the content, to push the hardware, to create the enthusiasm that's going to win this over at the end of the day. So I don't think this is like one or two big things that are like, if we don't fix this out, it's going to be a deal breaker for XR. I think it's all of us working on little individual problems to solve to make this thing really something amazing and big in the next 5 years.
Amazing. And then I'm going to segue to you, Diego. You're turning a new leaf now. This is the new normal, the new state of things. And what's exciting you on the horizon? You know, what challenges are immediately ahead of you? What are you looking to do in this space?
Yeah, I think as TJ was saying, there's a lot of challenges out there that there's an opportunity now to really get them through the forward into a much more use case that before that were very much theoretic. Today become very much realistic. From the production side, a lot into technologies that are changing the way we capture and create content. We're working with a startup in Israel, which are developing volumetric sound, which means change totally the way you capture sound and playback sound and interact with sound, which is something that has been very much used to produce in a way, and today we're seeing that there's a lot of friction and a lot of possibilities, especially as we come to higher bandwidth data and interaction. It's become something that even when we talk at AR, sound by its own can be an AR experience, an augmented reality experience, and we talk a lot about moving just to headsets and having a lot of visualization as you just by sound and you walk around, and as well as content creation. But obviously, I think as it comes to the visual side and the consumption of VR and AR content, people are moving much more with phones, and kids are used to see the world sometimes through the phone. I have a 6-year-old, which is very accustomed to take a phone, load his lovely character for Minecraft and place it through Sketchfab in the space in the home and walk around him and interact with him. And that's kind of, that's the way you see the world, through the phone. Is it right or wrong? We don't know. And I don't know if we are the ones who can really say. I think it's just the fact of the reality. I mean, we're from one side, we're pushing that type of content and pushing the technology. So, I think that there's a much more natural interaction with the digital space, which is just exciting to see how much we can enhance the world around us in ways that we before that thought. There used to be these demo movies and conceptual clips that shows how the future will look like, but now we're really in the place where we can start living that future in terms of content creation and experiences. So I am thrilled about the technology that's basically laying the background for the infrastructure on the content creation side, and as well a huge explosion of content consumption and how that is going to shift the total way we think about and create content. So it is as TJ and David say, there is some unfortunate sides to the pandemic, but being the best, very positive thinking. It's taking the opportunities of this new type of area and exploiting them to new places. And I think in the space where we are frustrated about the box office to be shut down, but I think at the end of the road, the possibilities for content and consumption are going to be exponentially larger than just the cinema. So again, I think it's just a momentum where we see things a bit slow down, but we're just going to be much more busy than we were before. So that's exciting.
I think that's actually an important point. I feel like there's a lot of people that fear these technologies displacing or replacing legacy businesses. And I actually think it's quite the opposite. I think it's going to explode opportunity for creatives and businesses the pie doesn't shrink. It just there's more slices to it, right? So there's more opportunity for all kinds of creators.
But you're right, Eric, about traditional companies, especially the entertainment and the media companies. It's a big sign when Warner brings in Jason Kilar. Like, it's a big sign. Like, I mean, people were shocked. I wasn't, because it makes complete sense. How are you running a massively huge, multifaceted media entertainment tech company without someone like that at the helm? Like, putting a traditional, executive there seems, archaic. And I think Diego's right. I think there's a buzz. There's this kind of, like, if you're in it, like, you can feel something, because it died 4 or 5 years ago. And TJ mentioned that explosion of VR, and it was like everywhere, but there's a buzz now, and people have to, like, adapt and quickly get on these, tech, movements, or they're just going to be left behind, and that's why you've seen so much change at Warner and so much change at NBC Universal, at least in my world. And we've grown our company on legacy businesses, film, television, and music, right? And sports. And, even the partners in my company are hiring people and know that there is no traditional without tech anymore. Like, it is one in the same. You cannot stop it, right? So I'm excited about the next 5 years, really excited, in addition to what I'm seeing with my kids at home, which scares me sometimes, to Diego's point. But at the same time, it's fascinating to watch. Like, in a pandemic, like, we're now okay with, all right, you can play video games, but you're gonna play video games with your friends. Okay. Like, that's social. That's better than just, being locked in a room and staring at a screen, by yourself. And, Roblox and Fortnite and what those things represent. Like, the gaming space is so exciting to me. It's just, I feel like, not that it hasn't always been huge, but just reborn with everyone understanding, what that looks like. And for us, now it's like, okay, Will Smith can't be in a movie and Vin Diesel might not be able to be in a movie. Let's put these guys in some video games, right? And interactive, really deep video games, right? Where, to be honest, they'll make more money, right? They'll make more money on the back end of those games, taking 50% less up front. They will 4X their total at the end of that game run in a second, right? And so the models are changing, the storytellers are there, the talents, adapting. You got the young kids who there's nothing stopping them, for better or for worse, to Diego's point. And then you've got companies like Verizon, right? And certainly I know a lot of folks on your team, TJ, and, like, the amount of time that's being spent to crack it. Like, these things are alive. I think that's what the buzz is. Like, all these things are happening at once. And it doesn't feel like 4 years ago where, like, VR shot out and then it was like, it was not a fun death. It was not fun to see that. Like, everyone was like, oh my God, here's VR, and then kind of disappeared for a period of time. So I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, and Eric, I think, as these guys bring up, this is human nature at the end of the day. People are inherently sort of afraid of change, and kind of fears things that are different. And, whether it's our kids doing, playing video games differently than how we had, right? We're all kind of questioning it, and it's not the same. But what's important here is that people still demand something, and there's still money in the ecosystem. So when movies dried up, people are still like, I need something to fill the void. And then you've got producers like, I've got money to spend, right? And so there's a formula there that, now we're pressured to adapt to something different because we're disrupted because of the pandemic. You've got people that are like, I can't go to the movies, but I need to be entertained, or, I'm going to be depressed. And then you've got the producers on the other end going, I've got the money to spend. So, and so this is all falling into the types of media that have always looked at the non-traditional movies and the ways that things are distributed. And it's falling back into the AR and VR space. And so I think that this time, as challenging it as it is, it's putting a lens on the things that we're doing as an alternative form and potentially a better form of how we consume content at the end of the day.
I want to be cognizant of our audience, because I also want to be very aware that I think the group of us, we speak a very sort of advanced version of this. This is we kind of live, sleep, eat, and breathe this every day, quite literally. But I want to be aware that a lot of the people watching this, these are new exotic technologies. And so we've got very little time left. I would just like a quick parting shot of, like, how do you get into this? Like, playing games, from a business perspective, just a quick, like, what's the best way to sort of start playing with these technologies? And just really quick, each of you, David, if you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we all have one thing in common. We all have these mobile devices, right? It's like that's the easiest, fastest way to get into it, whether it's a mobile game or AR, simple AR. Let's not forget Pokemon Go, which was the biggest AR thing, how many years ago, is still the biggest AR thing. The amount of money those guys are making is insane. So I think it's that. And I think if you're ready to take the next step, like go buy an Oculus, Quest 2. Like I guarantee you with that device, whoever buys that, and I think it's like the 64, MB is like $299, which isn't cheap, but it's not overly expensive. We'll enjoy it, and we'll get a lot of value out of just experiencing what VR is. They'll get it right away. I remember when the Wii first came out, everyone was like, "This is so cool," and everybody was playing and doing stuff. And I think it's your phone, and I think it's hopefully we can get more people to focus on the headsets because the content's fantastic. And then. I also think like people should be aware of these virtual worlds. Like this is the future. Like, like I watch my kids in Roblox and I watch my kids in Fortnite. These are the places people will hang and meet, and that's not all good and healthy there, but that's real. And I think it's those three things that people need to kind of jump into to test the waters. And they're easy to do with mostly your phone, but I'd love to see more people just buy that headset too.
Fantastic. Oh, Diego, how about you? How do people get into this?
Yeah, I think definitely take the leap and try the hardware that is out there. A headset is really common to take one, and it feels a bit at the end like something a bit scary sometimes, that you're fully connected into the digital space and not interconnected with the environment. But it's worth that's a really big step into, as David was saying, into this digital and metaverse space. As well as taking the phone. Definitely, for sure, take your phone, and there's a lot of AR experiences out there that definitely worth experimenting, playing with, and understanding the space better as it exists. And I think from there, lots of ideas will come out in terms of what next can be and what the opportunities are out there in terms of storytelling interaction. And as it comes for an entry point for the content creation side, most definitely real-time video game engines. I mean, Unreal, Unity, and few others. Even Roblox itself has a studio that you can plug in and start creating content. I mean, those are the environments, those are the spaces. The offline editing and the offline content creation has a very short lifespan today, and you have to be connected to the real-time game engines. I mean, that's where you're going to start, telling your stories, creating them, and as well, this is how people will consume it eventually. So that's a good entry point as well.
Great. Thanks, Diego. Thanks. Super smart. All right, TJ, you last up.
Yeah, so they took both of the easy answers for me.
We did,
So,
TJ. I was like,
mobile
we stole everything. You got nothing left. Sorry about that, brother.
devices and VR headsets. All right, what am I left with here? And so, Eric, thank you for sort of bringing this down a level in a good way, because I come home and I talk to family and friends about what I'm doing all the time, and it's like I'm talking flying cars to people, right? And it's just like that's just way over here. And there's so many times I have to figure out, like, all right, we're all on the same page here. We're patting each other on the back, having a good time. Yeah, we see what 5 years is going to look like. And people are just like, how do I get there? And if I pick that apart and I don't answer, give like, hey, here's an Oculus headset, which I do all the time. Here's a mobile phone, and here's some cool apps which you download all the time. I think that the gaming ecosystem is really setting the stage up for all of this too, right? So if you look at things like digital goods, digital personas, avatars, right? That's how we're going to get engaged in these spaces in the future. So, so for people who are like wondering what this all is, it's you're going to have a digital persona, digital twin at the end of the day that's going to be part of you in the digital and the physical world. And so as much as you start to adopt and adapt the concept that you are going to have an online identity and presence that is going to be formed in a digital world, and you're going to use that as part of augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality experiences, I think what you're really just prepped for in the future is what's the new form factor? Am I going to be putting glasses on and that's it? So it's I think we're getting there with the gaming and everything to that extent. I think if we focus on and we get people to think about their digital presence and awareness online, focused on what's important to them from a privacy standpoint, like get their head wrapped around that. These are the things that are going to be important when we finally make that jump and that leap into the augmented reality, mixed reality space. virtual reality too.
Great. Thank you, TJ. I love that you phrase it that it's talking about flying cars. I'm humbled every day that this is my job. I get to talk about flying cars every day. But I think that brings us to the end of our session. David, Diego, TJ, huge thank you for joining me today. And I hope the audience out there gets a lot from this. This is quite the brain trust we have here. And I hope it was worth it and fun for everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Eric. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.